Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture on AWS command line interface, AWS CLI. So this lecture will contain all these topics. What is AWS CLI, AWS configure, prerequisites to use the AWS CLI, Windows installation, macOS installation, AWS help, AWS command line structure, AWS wait command, AWS parameter types, AWS CLI parameter types, AWS CLI output format, AWS CLI output format, how to specify, AWS CLI server-side pagination options, AWS CLI client-side pagination options, configurations and credentials precedence. So what is AWS CLI? The AWS CLI is an open source tool that allows users to interact with AWS services using commands in their command line shell. The CLI can be used with common shell programs in Linux or Mac OS, Windows command prompt or PowerShell, and remotely on EC2 instances via SSH, PuTTY or AWS Systems Manager. With minimal configuration, the AWS CLI enables users to run commands that implement functionality equivalent to browser-based AWS Management Console. All AWS administration, management and access functions in the AWS Management Console are available in the AWS API and CLI. And with the new infrastructure as service feature IaaS, providing full functionality with 180 days of launch. The AWS CLI provides direct access to the public APIs of AWS services, allowing users to explore capabilities and develop shell scripts to manage resources. Several AWS services offers customization for the CLI, including high-level commands that simplify the use of complex APIs. So first command that we'll see is AWS configure, and this is the first command that you will run after installing AWS CLI, and this basically helps you to set up AWS to work with your AWS account, and you have to get an access key ID and access key. So this is you can just think of as a user ID and password. So key ID and access key are like how you interact with AWS services or your AWS account, but you never share this. So this is just a screenshot, and you never share with anybody both of it, even though I set user ID and password, but you never share key ID and access key with anybody. And then you enter a default region name. This you can change later on, but if you don't specify, it will the AWS CLI will assume that you want to work in this particular region, and you specify the output format, which is default is JSON. So JSON is the default output format, and after this, if you want to verify, you can run this particular command, AWS STS secure token service get caller identity, and this will tell you your user ID, your account ID, and your Amazon resource name. So prerequisites to use the AWS CLI. So it is recommended that you do not use your root account credentials to set up AWS CLI. So when you open an AWS account for the first time, usually we have the root account or root email ID, but it's better to have an IAM user, and you can give admin permissions, and then you set up your access key ID and secret access key. You create an IAM or IAM Identity Center administrative account, and then you install the latest version of AWS CLI on your computer. So installers are there for all three, Windows, Linux or Mac OS. You just download and run the installer. It's like any other program, like a GUI based. So just you download, click next, and install. So Windows installation. So basically you will install at this particular link, or if you just search Google for AWS CLI download, you will be directed to this link, and you can download the MSI, and you can run the command by double clicking or running this command. So if you want to have silent installation, you can say /qn, otherwise just run as it is. And after you have just run through the installer, you can just run this command, AWS -- version. You should see some output like this to confirm that installation is successful on Windows. Coming to Mac OS, just search for Mac OS CLI interface. You will just search for CLI. You will see all three options, Mac, Windows and Linux. So just download the installer. It's a GUI based. So there are two options. You can install for all users, but this requires sudo, or you can just say for yourself, for current user, and the recommended default folder is user local AWS CLI, and installer creates a symbolic link at this, but installation location is this. And after that you create a symlink. Anyway, this will be taken care, and it will create AWS completer and AWS programs by using the following commands. So you can create if you have if you have installed for only the current user, you may have to run these two commands, sudo symbolic link, and it will basically create so that it is available in your path. Then you can open terminal and shell prompt from anywhere, and it will be picked up from this particular location, user local bin AWS and user local bin AWS completer. So this is basically a symbolic link which is pointing to here, but this is already set as the default folder. And after that, just to confirm, you can just which AWS and AWS version. So just to summarize and simplify, you just run the installer. You just choose for the current user, or just choose all the defaults, and then you open a shell prompt terminal and just run this command. This is just extra information for you to be aware, like where it has installed and all. Okay, next command after you have done is you can run AWS help. So AWS version is the first, or if you just run help, it will show you all the sub commands which are available. And let's say it will say which all service you can interact with. Then after that, you can pick the service name. Let's say we have picked up EC2. Then you can always say AWS EC2 help. Then it will say what all is applicable for EC2, and then you can use that with EC2. So let's say after this, you will see that EC2 offers something like describe instances. So it will just describe all the instances which are running in your AWS account. And on top of that, if you want to see how to use this, you just say help again. You copy from here. So you start from here, you see all the service name, you pick the service, you put it here, then you see what operations are performed on this service. You take the operation name and help, and then you will see all how to use this particular option parameter also. Then so this finally, maybe you will come to something like you want to describe all instances, or you want to pick one instance IDs and how to pick that from describe instances, and you can see specific information for that specific instance ID. Okay, next is AWS command structure. So you would have already understood that it follows this particular pattern. You have AWS command, and you have sub command, and then you have options and parameters. So command was in this case was EC2 and describe instances, and then you provide some options and parameters. So this is the default structure for AWS CLI. So same AWS S3 ls list simple storage service. You list all the buckets. Then there is something called as wait command. So some AWS services have wait commands available. Any command that uses AWS wait usually waits until a command is complete before it moves on to the next step. This is especially useful for multi-path commands or scripting, as you can use a wait command to prevent moving to subsequent steps if the wait command fails. So there is one option. The AWS CLI uses a multi-path structure on the command line for the wait command that must be specified in this order. So the following wait change set. So following command, the following wait change set create complete. So change set create complete. Example, pauses and resumes only after it can confirm that the my change set. So we have given my change set in the my stack is ready to run. So it will wait and it will continue only if it is available to run. So this is just for example. This is a bit advanced example, but it may not be used on a per day basis. But it's good to know that there is some wait functionality available in case it takes a long time. Okay, next is AWS parameter types. So we have already seen the AWS EC2 create keep pair, but we'll come to this last part. So we have this argument and argument value. So we'll see what are different values that we can specify in the here. So this is like we are saying something like string. So parameter types. So first is string, which is an alphanumeric character, symbols and white spaces, and white spaces must be surrounded by quotation marks. So this was the first type. And then we have timestamp, which is based on ISO 86001 standard. And you can give like whole if you want to give the maximum, or you can just say YYMMDD also. This is also acceptable. So this is based on, if you just Google ISO 86001, you'll find out there are 3-4 formats which you can specify. This is only for if the argument type is timestamp. Next is a list. So you can specify a list, and list it should be like space separated. So we are saying instance types, M1X large space M1 medium. So we can have list of values. If the values have space, then you must be like surround them with quotation marks, like a double quotes. Then you have boolean. You can just this is basically used to switch on or off some option. Next is integer. So is straightforward, like max items. And then you have a blob, which is binary large object. To pass a value to a parameter with type blob, you must specify a path to a local file that contains the binary data using the file B prefix. Files referenced using file B prefix are always treated as raw encoded binary. So in this example, we are specifying a blob file, and this is you have to say file B colon like this, and the file path. Next is streaming blob. So streaming blob, such as for example AWS cloud search domain, then you want to upload documents, we do not use any prefixes. Instead, streaming blob parameters are formatted using the direct file path. So this command gives an example. So we can say documents and just the path of the file where the document is kept. Then we have map, which is a set of key value pairs specified in JSON or by using the CLI shorthand syntax. So this is the shorthand syntax. So you can see this whole map is in single quotes, then followed by the whole JSON thing. So this is this is specified in JSON. So this is like map. So you can have more value, like if you put comma, and you can have some more structure inside that. This will be a type of map. And then you have a document. Document types are used to send data without needing to embed JSON inside strings. The document type enables services to provide arbitrary schema for you to use more flexible data types. So this is like a document. So this has a keyword document, and then the structure. So this is not JSON, because this is also JSON, but it has a more flexible type. So in some certain cases this is also used, but it's used less, but still some services use this particular syntax also. Okay, now coming to AWS CLI output format. So first is output format. We are saying like when we run some command, what all types it will use to output the data that we will see. So first is JSON, JSON string. Second, it can output the output content in YAML format. Then YAML stream. The output is streamed and formatted as YAML string. Streaming allows for faster handling of large data types. So this is applicable where the output is very large. You can say YAML stream, so you can see as it is outputting the content. Next is text. The output is formatted as multiple lines of tab separated string values. This can be useful to pass the output to a text processor like grep, sed or awk. So in certain use cases, this is also helpful if you want to feed in this data to some command line tools. Even for JSON on YAML, you can use pipe it to JQ or YQ. And lastly, we have table. The table is formatted as a table using the characters like plus, minus, and this pipe to form the cell borders. It typically presents the information in human-friendly format that is much easier to read than others, but not as programmatically useful. So it's more easy on eyes, but not, you cannot program it or pipe it to any other utility. Okay, now how to specify these formats. First is in the using the output option in a name profile. So in the config file, the following example sets the output format to text. So in the default profile, you can just say config file output is equal to text. So it will always, or you can make it JSON, YAML, or table. So whatever is the default option, it will pick that one. Second option is used to environment variable. using the AWS default output. The following output sets the format to table for the commands in this command line session until the variable is changed or the session ends. Using this environment variable overrides any value set in the config value. So let's say I have set export AWS default output equal to table, but this is text. So this will override this option, and this is in that session because this is an environment variable. So I open a terminal or command line prompt and I put this, so it will honor this setting and take precedence over this one. And lastly, we have using the dash dash output option on the command line. So the following example sets the output of only this one command to JSON. Using this option on the command overrides any currently set environment variable or the value in the config file. So if we have command like, this is for simple workflow service, AWS SWF, list domains, registration status, registered, output JSON. So because this is per command basis, because every time we run a command, so this has the highest precedence. So this will override this and this will override this. Because it's per command, this is for a whole terminal session, and this is if you don't set anything. So now we'll see something about pagination. So their first option, pagination, is used when we are retrieving something from the AWS environment, and we have couple of options. One is no paginate, dash dash no paginate. The dash dash no paginate option disables following pagination tokens on the client side. When using a command, by default the AWS CLI automatically makes multiple calls to return all possible results to create pagination, one call for each page. Disabling pagination has the AWS CLI only call once for the first page of the command result. So for example, let's say if you run AWS S3 API list objects, which will list all the objects on your S3 bucket that contains, but that bucket has, let's say, more than 1000 objects or files. The AWS CLI only makes first call to Amazon S3, returning only the first 1000 objects in the final output, which is the default objects which are result in the which is returned in the first page. So 1000 objects. If you say no paginate, otherwise it will try to bring all the more than it will go to second page, third page. So it will so pagination will not happen. So only first page results, which are 1000 files, will be returned. Second is page size. So if you see issues when running list commands on a large number of resources, the default page size might be too high. This can cause calls to AWS services to exceed the maximum allowed time and generate a timeout. So you can use the dash dash page size option to specify that AWS CLI requests a smaller number of items from each call to the AWS service. The AWS CLI still retrieves the full list, but performs a larger number of service API calls in the background and retrieves a smaller number of items with each call. This gives the individual calls a better chance of succeeding without a timeout. Changing the page size does not affect the output. It affects only the number of API calls that need to be made to generate the output. So in this case, page size is, we are saying 100. It will still make, so default page size will be 1000. For example, if we are doing S3 API list objects, but we are saying make more calls, retrieve less data, and show one by one. So this is, if we say like this, probably it will time out, but in this case, it will, we are breaking down the problem into smaller batches. Next is max items, dash dash max item. To include fewer items at a time in the AWS CLI output, use the dash dash max items option. The AWS CLI still handles pagination with the service as described previously, but prints out only the number of items at a time that you specify. So this will show that many number of items. So we have seen max size, and this is max items. And finally, the dash dash starting token. So if the number of items output, which is max items, is fewer than the total number of items returned by the underlying API calls, the output includes a next token that you can pass to a subsequent command to retrieve the next set of items. The following example shows how to use the next token value returned by the previous example and enables you to retrieve the second 100 items. So let's say you have S3 API list objects, then that is returning 1000 objects, and you have max size 1000, but you want to print only 100. So max items is 100. So this and this work together. So when you run first time, it will give you a token, and then that token you have to specify in this, and this will again give the next token. So basically it's a way to know from where to fetch the next set of results. So if I want to explain, it will be something like this. So we have, this is one first 100 items, then next 100 items, next 100 items, and next 100 items, right? And I am saying that in my command line I am reading from first time. I don't get first time I am running this command, it has written the result and it has given me a token, and that token I use to specify from where I want to pick. So this token will have a pointer over here, then this will give return the result, and it will also come with a token, and this has to go here, provide the token and read the data from here. And same for the last batch, it will return, and last will have the token probably as null or nothing. So I know for sure that I have fetched all the results, and these two work together like max items and starting token. Okay, so the specified AWS service might not return items in the same order each time you call. So this is, if you call multiple calls, you will see the order does not remain consistent. So if you specify different values for page size and max items, you can get unexpected results with missing or duplicated items. And to prevent this, use the same number for page size and max items to sync the AWS CLI pagination with the pagination of underlying service. So if you are running two calls, make sure that the exact API call is exactly the same with page size and max items. You can also retrieve the whole list and perform any unnecessary paging operations locally. So what I mean to say is when you do max items and the starting token, what we specify, let's say we have specified default page size is 1000, even though it's not visible in this command, and we have specified max items. So when you do starting token, you don't change the page size option. So you just run the exact command as it is, just changing the token which has returned. Don't change the other parameters. Okay, next we'll see AWS CLI client side pagination option. So we have seen server side, now we'll see the client side. So you can save your locally used configuration settings and credentials in files. Credentials are sorry, so this is the default client side pagination. So settings, so this is the name profile, and herein you can set the output pager to less. So this is in the AWS config file. If you set less, this is, so server is giving lot of information. Now on the client on your computer, if you want to use less, so you can use less as a pager. So you can just do something like space, and if we go page down, you can see information 1 bit at a time. And this one, if you don't want to use any kind of pagination, you can say in the config file equal to nothing. Okay, these are some other options. This is for setting client side pagination option in the terminal session. So what we have seen is globally. So if you set in file, it will be global. This will be overriding. So in a specific session, you can say export AWS pager equal to less. For Windows, you can say setx AWS pager equal to less. Not equal to, just space and less. If you don't want to disable the use of pager, you can just say nothing and blank. So it will just print everything in one shot on your terminal. And last one is the this is per command basis. So if you just say -- no CLI pager, it will override whatever is in the config file, and whatever is the terminal session, it will override. So same way before, config file first preference, then second session, third is per command. Okay, last is some configuration and credentials precedence. So we have seen configurations and credentials, how they override each other. So credentials and configuration settings are located in multiple places, such as the system or user environment variables, local AWS configuration files, or explicitly declared on the command line as a parameter. Certain location takes precedence over others. The AWS CLI credentials and configuration settings take precedence in the following order. So first is highest is command line options, override settings in other locations such as --region, --output, and --profile. So this is how we specify in the command line. This has the highest priority. Second is environment variables. So you can declare in system environment variables. We have seen that with the pager and server side. Third one is assume role. So assumes the permission of an IAM role through configuration or AWS STS assume role command. So there is something like assume role command that will take the third, that has the third priority. Fourth is assume role with web identity. You assume the permissions of an IAM role using web identity through configuration or AWS STS assume role command. Fifth one is AWS IAM Identity Center, which is AWS single sign-on. The IAM Identity Center configuration settings stored in the config file are updated when you run the AWS configure SSO command. So there is a command called AWS configure SSO. The config file is located at this particular location dash AWS config. This is for Mac or Linux and this is for Windows. Sixth one priority is configuration file. The credentials and config files are updated when you run the AWS configure command. The credential file is located at this particular location, and for Windows it's credentials. This is the command that we have seen in the first slide, which is AWS configure. So when you configure, you provide secret access key and secret access ID, key ID and access key. So this will get stored in this file, these two files, and config is the configuration file. So just remember there are two files, .aws-config and .aws-credentials. So these are the hidden folders, and inside that these two files, this is for configuration and this is output format, all those things we have seen, pager and all, and this is for the password, secret ID and key. And Windows is C users username, again hidden folder .aws and credentials and config. Seventh priority is any custom process. So you get your credentials from an external source. Then configuration file. The credentials and config files are updated when you run the command AWS configure. So the config file is located at, so this is configuration file from, okay, so this is for identity center. So if you run SSO based and this one is 8th priority, this configuration file. And 9th priority is container credentials. So you can associate an IAM role with each of your Amazon Elastic Container Service, Amazon ECS task definitions. Temporary credentials for that role are then available to that tasks container. So you can specify in the container credentials. And lastly, this is the 10th, it will get from Amazon EC2 instance profile credentials. So you can associate an IAM role with each of your Amazon Elastic EC2 instances. Temporary credentials for that role are then available to code running in that instance. The credentials are delivered through the Amazon EC2 metadata service. So in the EC2 instance profile, you can specify the IAM role and that will be picked up the last. And if you give option like this, it will start from here, and wherever it find the appropriate configuration or the credential, it will continue till the last 10th point. And that's all. Thanks for watching.